At the westernmost point in Nova Scotia, it's Brier Island. There are only about 200 people live here and about 100 year-round residences. It's a popular place for whale and seabird watching, and it has beautiful vistas, which makes it a great place for hiking. And that's why I've come here for my walkabout today. If you were to follow the coastline of Brier Island all the way around, you would walk about 25 kilometers, and many people do that as a day hike. Some of that on formal trail, some on informal trail, and some on dirt road. I'm tackling 3 sections today on my hike. Why 3 sections? Well, the trails on Brier Island are of varying degrees of intensity. I'm leaving here from Northern Light, and I'm gonna hike up to P-Jack Cove. That's a little under 4 kilometers. You can continue hiking from there onto Western Light, but at this time of year it can be very wet and overgrown, and sometimes nearly impossible to pass. So I'll pick up the trail again at Western Light and head across a more formal trail built by the Nature Conservatory of Canada. Then I'll head back towards town and visit the Bog Meadow Trail to see this work in progress. There are 3 lighthouses associated with Brier Island. There's Northern Light back here, which is also called Grand Passage Lighthouse, named for the channel between Long Island and Brier Island. There's Western Light, which I'll be hiking by later on, and there's Peters Island Lighthouse, which is found right in Grand Passage on the St. Mary's Bay side. Northern Light and Alarm is not only a lighthouse, but is also the Coast Guard station for the area. You can often see whales playing in the ocean near shore from here. The Peters Island Lighthouse is found at the mouth of Grand Passage between Long and Brier Islands. That lighthouse is automated, and Peters Island itself is now a bird sanctuary. The island includes many bird species, including common and Arctic terns, as well as breeding colonies of herring and great black gulls, and double-crested cormorants, among others. Very close to St. Peter's Island, you'll also find some of the tidal energy testing sites looking to harness the power of the tidal current through the passage. Behind me here is Seal Cove, and if you're lucky, you'll see why it's got that name. It's often full of seals at low tide. The seals aren't in close today, but they are just offshore, and that's why this is called Seal Cove. Though Brier Island is a really popular place for whale and seabird watching, it's often surrounded by fog. I'm really lucky this morning. There's been no fog. It's a beautiful, calm, sunny day. But the fog is why the lighthouses I mentioned earlier are so important. There are over 57 shipwrecks around Brier Island. It's not completely clear where the name Brier Island comes from. One story says that it comes from the wild brier roses that are found on this island. A second version of the story says that the island is named after an old sea captain who was one of the first inhabitants here, Captain Brier, though his name was spelled with a Y rather than an I. The village of Westport, near where I began this hike, was first settled in 1769. Westport is a traditional fishing village. Most of the residents make their income from fishing. Being so remote, Brier Island also has to endure being cut off from the world by storms. Perhaps most famously, on February 2nd, 1976, Brier Island was ravaged by the Groundhog Day storm. The storm washed away much of the island's waterfront in Westport. Not everything along this trail is ocean-related, like this golf cart, but it makes for a great place to take a rest while you're moving along the trail. Brier Island is, unsurprisingly, full of stories of the sea. It was once home to Joshua Slocum, who, between 1895 and 1898, became the first person to circumnavigate the globe solo. Joshua Slocum is among the most famous of the historic Brier Island residents. He moved to the island at 8 years old, where his grandfather was a lighthouse keeper. Joshua worked in his father's boot shop, helping to make boots for fishermen. But it was the fishermen who intrigued him most. At 14, he signed on to work on a ship, and at 16, he left home permanently to work at sea. By the time he sailed the world solo on his sloop, the Spray, Joshua was a naturalized American citizen. But he never forgot home, and at the start of his round-the-world journey, he spent an extended time visiting Brier Island and other Nova Scotia ports. Interestingly, the Coast Guard rescue vessel based in Brier Island is called the Spray, but officially it is named for the spray of water and not Slocum's boat. However, being based in the island's port, one can't help but make the connection. If you remember, I mentioned earlier that some sections of trail can get wet. This is what I mean. And apparently the section between Cove and Winterlight is really wet. So I'll be skipping that section today. This is Perro Cove. The locals call it P-Jack Cove. The trail continues here and on to Western Lighthouse. With the recent rains, it's become very wet, and the locals tell me that it's very, very boggy in parts and difficult to pass. I don't have time to circumnavigate the entirety of Brier Island today anyhow, so I'm going to pick up the trail at Western Lighthouse. Feel the sunshine. Avid hikers and birdwatchers will tell you that continuing to hike from P-Jack Cove to Western Light is well worth the effort. It can be difficult walking at times, but it's a fabulous opportunity to explore the coastline as you near the end of the Bay of Fundy. I mentioned earlier that Brier Island is part of the North Mountain Ridge. The basalt from that ridge is formed in dramatic shapes, which, if you've ever been to the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, you might notice a resemblance. The often hexagonal shape of the basalt is the result of a geologic process called columnar joining. What happened long, long ago was hot lava covered this area. As it cooled over time, it shrunk, resulting in cracking and spacing. When the contraction is fairly even, you get hexagonal columns. In places near the water, like the ocean, the cooling can be more rapid and the effect more dramatic. And that's why you see similar structures on the coast here as you do on Northern Ireland's coast. Well, I've made it to Western Head Lighthouse on Brier Island, and this is the most westerly point in all of Nova Scotia. Back that way is the Bay of Fundy. That's where I came from on the first part of the trail. And out there is the Gulf of Maine. Now this is an absolutely beautiful place to watch a sunset. As it happens, this is also the location of the Brier Island Nature Preserve, and that's where I'm continuing my hike. The Nature Conservancy of Canada established the Brier Island Nature Preserve in 1988 because of its importance to migrating birds on what is known as the Atlantic Flyway. The Atlantic Flyway is a major bird migration corridor along the Atlantic coast all the way to the Caribbean and South America. Brier Island is an important stopping and nesting location for many species, and more than 300 species of bird have been recorded here. The Nature Conservancy of Canada has built this trail which runs along Whipple Point all the way to Pond Cove. It's part of the trail system that really circumnavigates all of Brier Island, and this part goes right around an important nesting habitat, which makes for great viewing opportunities for birds. This preserve covers about 1,200 acres of Brier Island, and it's kept clean with the help of local and conservancy volunteers who organize beach cleanups and make sure debris is picked up so that the marine mammals and the seabirds don't get injured. Brier Island really is considered a birder's paradise. May to June is peak migration time here on the island, and there are literally thousands of songbirds, hawks, seabirds, shorebirds, and waterfowl in the area. Of 470 plant and animal species seen in Nova Scotia, amazingly, more than 350 have been seen on this island. With so many plant species found here, it's no wonder that this is a popular destination for those interested in flora. For example, more than 20 species of orchid are found on the island. This is Big Pond Cove, and behind me there is Little Pond Cove. Their names are very literal. There's a little pond behind Little Pond Cove and a big pond behind here. This marks the official end of the Nature Conservancy Trail. Now, normally you wouldn't walk along the beach, although you can. There is actually a trail behind the cove. Unfortunately, it's underwater at the moment. This Nature Conservancy Trail is probably the most popular section as you travel around Brier Island. Now, you can continue on from here by following dirt roads and some ATV track all the way back into Westport, basically where I started. But my hiking for the day is almost at an end here on Brier Island. But before I go, there's a new trail that's under construction that I want to have a look at. This is Big Meadow Bog. The Brier Island Trail Society is working to create a trail system here. This bog is home to many of the birds who visit Brier Island, but it's also home to the rare eastern mountain raven, which is a globally rare plant that is found in only 2 locations in the world, here on Brier Island and in New Hampshire. The Trail Society, together with the Nature Conservancy, is working to restore this bog. Why restore it? Well, back in the 1950s, residents tried to drain this bog and turn it into farmland. Farming might surprise you, and perhaps it should. Brier Island is a tough place to do any kind of farming at all. The land is just not conducive to agriculture. But in its early years, a few very hardy families farmed enough to supply some fresh produce to people living on the island, as well as producing enough wood for heating and cooking. For the most part, however, for anything not available here, residents on Brier Island would trade with the French shore across St. Mary's Bay. Needless to say, the plan to drain the bog and repurpose it really didn't work out. However, this area is now a really important example of a habitat restoration. It's an opportunity to educate people about the importance of bogs, and fundraising is underway to extend this boardwalk and also improve the interpretation of the site. Over the years, Brier Island changed with the times. Fishing boats became bigger and better equipped. Roads improved so much that freight boats, which once carried goods, became a thing of the past, to be replaced by trucks. and with trucks came oil and propane, so coal and wood were less important. So too, the need for local farms on the island diminished as produce was easier to bring to the island. Things have changed on the island. The only constant has been the rock formations.
Come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you
The people on Brier Island still rely on the ocean for much. Fishing is still incredibly important here. But ocean energy is starting to creep in from the sidelines. And bringing people here for seabird and whale watching is a mainstay. This is a place you can come to just get away from it all. After all, there are few paved roads and no traffic lights. My time on Brier Island has come to an end. And so tomorrow, I'll be taking the ferry over to Long Island and taking on a hike that's a bit of a balancing act.
come on, won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
Whether you're coming from hiking or whale and seabird watching on Brier Island, or you're coming from mainland Nova Scotia, Long Island is just one ferry away. Long Island is about 15 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. And it's here on the St. Mary's Bay side of the island that you'll find the Balancing Rock Trail. You know, I was here about 20 years ago, and I'm excited to come back and see what improvements they've made. The Balancing Rock Trail is an easy, well-groomed trail. It's fairly short at under 2 kilometers each way. It should be fairly doable for most people, but keep in mind, it does include a 235-step staircase at the end of the trail to bring you closer to St. Mary's Bay and a look-off. The reason for the name Balancing Rock for this trail will become obvious at the end of the hike. In fact, the Balancing Rock is one of the most photographed places on all of Long Island and perhaps Nova Scotia. In fact, if you Google Long Island, invariably this trail will come up in your results. Long Island was never formally settled by Europeans until the 1800s. Being an island made it relatively difficult to access. It was British loyalists who set up the first permanent settlements here, having been given land grants. By far the biggest industry on the island is lobster fishing, but tourism comes in second because of a combination of outdoor activities like whale watching and this trail, which has become a big attraction over the years. In fact, summer tourists can outnumber residents on the island. These beautiful flowers are called pink lady slippers or moccasin flowers. Such a treat to see them. The skunk cabbage is one of the earliest signs of winter's end. As the plant grows, it actually helps thaw the ground. Its bloom appears through the snow. The name of the plant is related to the smell of the leaves when crushed. While the plant can be poisonous, the Mi'kmaq used it for medicinal purposes and even as a deodorant. The skunk cabbage is common on Long Island, but it's rare elsewhere in the province. A little further up the island, you can visit Central Grove Provincial Park. There you can find hiking trails that take you to the Bay of Fundy side of the island. Occasionally you can see whales from the shore without even having to get on a boat. Nearby you'll also find an old Baptist church, which has a pump organ and kerosene lamps, a blast from the past and a reminder of the days before electricity. This woodland plant is called the bunchberry. It's related to the dogwood, and you see it all over the place along this trail, and in fact, throughout Nova Scotia. This is the start of 235 steps, all the way down to St. Mary's Bay and Balancing Rock. I suppose the stairs are a little bit easier than having to navigate the slope. Long Island, just like Brier Island and Digby Neck, is formed from basalt. Balancing Rock itself is made up of one of the hardest types of basalt in this area. That basalt comes from lava that once covered much of this area. As the lava cooled, it cracked to form 5 to 7-sided column-like structures. Tectonic forces created cracks which waves of the ocean took advantage of, creating Balancing Rock and thousands of other rock columns which line St. Mary's Bay. It's absolutely gorgeous here. These basalt cliffs are just so dramatic, and you see the color on the rocks. Well, that's actually a species of lichen that thrives in the salt spray. It grows into the rock at a rate of about 2 millimeters a year. Well, this is St. Mary's Bay, and across the water, mainland Nova Scotia. If you want to know exactly where we are, well, right across from us is Weymouth, Saulnieville, and Church Point. So this is the reason people do this hike, Balancing Rock. You know, there's a story that a fisherman once tried to remove that rock from its perch. He came up, put a rope around it, and tried to pull it down with his boat. He obviously wasn't successful, and that's really no surprise, since 1 cubic meter of basalt can weigh over 3 tons. The rock itself is estimated to weigh 20 tons and is over 20 feet high. And it's very old, over 200 million years. I can remember years ago you could walk right up to the rock. You can imagine the photos of everyone trying to push it over. It really isn't balancing, but it appears so. But safety concerns over people clambering up over the rocks, and perhaps the idea that the rock might actually one day fall, resulted in this viewing platform being constructed. Balancing Rock has been called nature's timepost, and certainly the rock formations here and on Brier Island have witnessed a lot over the millennia. As Nathaniel Hawthorne once said, time flies over us and leaves its shadows behind. And these rocks, well, they're nature's shadows. Wherever your next walkabout takes you, I hope you find some shadows of time.